we can minimize the pain and maximize the results if we focus a bit on some basic smart ways of getting started. What we want to do here is drive out the waste, minimize the chance that we're using up resources and time and opportunity for deals that don't really exist. That it's not really a deal in the first place. I was talking with a friend of mine who is a proposal consultant in the UK, and he was describing one of his clients who received an RFP from a multinational corporation, and it was requesting the kind of professional services that this client organization is very good at. So they got very excited because here's an opportunity for global work, massive amount of follow-on. It was just exactly what they wanted. So they put together a team, and they analyzed the RFP, and they spent 6 weeks building a tremendous case. They even went out and they hired an outside firm to do the graphics for them. They spent over 100,000 pounds on graphics alone. They went in to present to the team at the multinational corporation, and when they got there, they showed up with 4 or 5 members of their team, and their host said, "We are blown away by your enthusiasm. We appreciate how much effort you've gone into and all the folks you've brought." He says, "Especially since we don't intend to actually award this contract for 3 more years." And everybody just stopped and looked at each other like, "What? You don't intend to award this contract?" Basically, the multinational was going through an exercise to find out what was out there. They weren't going to change vendors for 3 years. So they had just spent 6 weeks of their lives and 100,000 pounds of the company's money for nothing. Maybe not quite nothing, but not much. So let's make sure that before we leap in and start responding and answering questions, we actually think about it, make sure we know what we're doing, and we're doing it in a smart way. For example, a little reality check here. Is this a qualified opportunity? I'll show you in a second, a 3-step process for qualifying the opportunity so you can make sure that you really are confident. Do we know how the customer makes decisions? Do we know who's making the decision? Are we talking to the right people? Do we know who the key buying influencers are? If we're selling, for example, IT consulting, we may be talking to the IT manager, but the actual decision maker might be the chief financial officer. Have we talked to that person? Can we see that the RFP has been tailored in a way that it favors us? If we've been doing a lot of work with this client, pre-RFP, and we've given them some ideas, and we've suggested some strategies, they may show up in the RFP, and that's very good. We want to see that. On the other hand, we may recognize language and concepts and approaches which one of our competitors uses. Doesn't mean we shouldn't bid, but it may mean that we're losing this race already. We're behind in trying to win the hearts and minds of the decision team. Do we know who those competitors even are? Do we have internal coaches or champions who are giving us cues as to the best way to approach this and what to emphasize and what to not worry about? These are all significant questions. What they point to is we need to have some kind of existing relationship, either through the sales process or our business development process or through networking, something so that we have insight into the client organization. Because if we don't, we have very little chance of winning. Statistically, research indicates that if you get an RFP in your inbox and you've never talked to the client, you have no prior contact with them, you have 1 chance in 20 of winning that business. So, the optimists out in the crowd will be saying, so that means, I do have a chance, right? Well, yeah, you got a chance, but aren't there other opportunities where the probability is a little higher than 5%? I mean, even in Vegas, the games are a little better than that. You got better than a 95% chance of losing. So just be realistic with yourself because, there's only so many hours in a day, and if you spend them on deals where you really have no shot, you're kind of throwing that resource away. How do you qualify? What do we need to do to make sure that it's a real deal? Well, one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we're answering some of the basic questions here. Effective qualification is a three-part process. What we need to do is look at some fundamental questions to find out whether or not we're going to go forward. I mean, it's that simple. And the three things we want to look at is this a real deal? Are they serious? Are they really going to hire somebody? Can we compete? You know, do we have what they're looking for, and can we make a strong case that we're the best choice? And then finally, can we win? And usually that boils down to a value proposition. So in terms of figuring out, is it a real deal? Ask yourself, is there something that's driving this? Is there a compelling need? Has there been a change in their market? Have they been affected by changes in the regulatory requirements? Have they set aside budget for this? Do we know the people? Do we have a relationship with them? In terms of being able to compete, it's not just being technically compliant. It's also, do you have anything that differentiates you? Is there something you do that others don't do that adds value? And then in terms of winning, it really comes down to value, you know, a value proposition. Can we establish a return on investment or other measure of value based on what we have to offer and the differentiators we bring to the game so that we stand apart from our competition? If we can answer these questions, yes, we should go for it. And if we've got a few no's, we may need to rethink. Now, truthfully, if you're answering no in the areas of can we compete, can we win, you can fix that. You can get into you know, changing the way you position yourself, or you can do a little more research and figure out other ways to differentiate and so on. The one you can't fix is whether or not they're serious. If the answer to the question, is this a real deal, is no, stop. Don't go any further, because you can't convince them to do something if they're not serious about it in the first place. And as we talked about, sometimes, you know, organizations do in fact issue RFPs when they have no intention whatsoever of buying from anybody. All right, the bottom line here is you can improve your win ratio most effectively and most quickly if you just stop bidding for things you can't win. And I know that it sounds simplistic, but I can't begin to tell you how often I've encountered people who just want to give it the old college try. You know, who knows? We might win. Well, who knows? You know, an asteroid might hit the Earth too. Why don't we focus on things that are more likely? Now, if you decide to go forward, you've got this document in front of you, and the RFP, you know, it may be a one-pager, it might be an email, it may be a very complicated document. You know, dozens and dozens of pages, including a lot of legal language. Regardless, you know, 4 basic steps to making sure we understand it. So the first step is we want to review the RFP and make sure that we fully understand what it says and what it contains. The second step is to identify all the requirements. What exactly are we being asked for in this opportunity? The requirements, some of them might be technical. Some of them might be around delivery schedules. Some of them might be in terms of our background or our capabilities. Whatever it is, we've got to make sure we understand them and are confident that we can actually respond. A third issue, a third step, if you will, is to make sure we understand the customer or the prospective customer's business case based on asking 7 questions. And I'll show you those 7 questions here in a minute. And then once we've done that, we just need to kick off the project. If you're, you know, working solo and you're responding to this RFP, then you can kick it off pretty easily. Get a cup of coffee and sit down and start working. If it's more of a team project and you've got a group who's going to help you, then it'll be a little more formal, and you'll need to make an effort to do this in a systematic way. So those are the 4 things we want to do. Let's talk a minute about reviewing the RFP and making sure that we understand it. Fundamentally, reviewing the RFP document is a matter of kind of pulling it apart, you know, looking at what it contains, making sure we fully understand the contents here. And this is a process that in proposal land is called bursting the document. What you're looking at is the administrative requirements, the legal, the format guidelines, and the content requirements. Administrative requirements would be things like, where do you submit? Do they want a hard copy, or will they accept an electronic submission? If they want hard copies, how many do they have to have? What's the deadline for submitting? That's a big one. In federal or state bids, if the deadline is Friday at 3 and yours shows up at 3:15, you are disqualified automatically. They cannot accept it. So we've got to be clear about that. Legal requirements, you want to read these carefully, because sometimes there's hidden language in the RFP where you are agreeing to give them your intellectual capital. You're giving away the rights to what it is you have to sell. So if you do training programs, or if you have a particular IT approach, or something else, which is really the basis of what you have to offer, sometimes they put language in there where essentially you're giving it away. So you have to take objections to that, or not bid, if they won't budge. Sometimes, not very often in the private sector, but sometimes in public sector bids, you'll see format guidelines. There'll be page limits. Proposals must not be more than 25 pages, 100 pages, whatever it is. Or they will even go so far as to specify font sizes and margins, and whether or not you can use color and stuff like that. You may think it's getting a little granular, that these people are control freaks, but what you have to understand is on some of these, they may be getting 100 submissions. And unfortunately, over the years, lots of companies have abused the process by submitting voluminous documentation. So imagine getting 100 proposals, each of which was 500 pages long, and of the 500 pages, 400 pages of it was just kind of only peripherally relevant. You too would start issuing format guidelines and mandating page limits. The one that matters the most is the content requirements, and that's where we really look at the questions they're asking, what it is they want us to do, what's the scope of work, what are the deliverables, all of that. And obviously that's going to be the burden of our response, but the reality is they can disqualify you for any of these reasons. So if you don't do any of this stuff quite the way they want it, or if you don't negotiate exceptions, chances are they're going to throw you out. Once you've done that, you may find that the RFP document itself is a little, what should we say, confused, because these are often put together by teams or by committees. Sometimes it seems like the members of that committee don't particularly like each other, so they don't talk to each other. So you get contradictory elements. You may get things out of order. So it'll help you to reorganize things and make sure that you understand exactly what they want. And if there are contradictory elements, seek clarification. There's often an opportunity for bidders to ask questions or to submit them. But here's the thing. Even if you do reorganize it so that it flows in a more logical way, you need to respond in the order they wrote it, because they're going to score all these, and they're going to try to do it as quickly as possible. And if you've rearranged it, you just made their job a lot harder. And trust me, they don't value that. They don't value getting more work on their table.